Local Women Magazine presents Local Women Podcast, the show for things that matter. Keeping an Eye on It podcast from Local Women Magazine is brought to you by Cathedral Eye Clinic, Northern Ireland's leading eye specialist.
Welcome to the Keeping an Eye on It podcast from Local Woman, and we're sponsored by Cathedral Eye Clinic. Thank you so much for joining us today on the only female panel podcast in Northern Ireland, where only the opinions of women matter. Now, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. We're not men haters, we're just really pro-woman. Now, every week I gather together a panel of wonderful ladies, and this week I have a treat for you. So who do I have this week? Right here, I have the gorgeous Joanna Denton. Joanna went to school with me, only she was a lot cleverer than I am. But that's okay. Joanna is a business coach, life coach, mentor, expert on burnout, author of a book on burnout called A Different Truth. She's a Local Woman columnist. She worked in one of the big four firms in Luxembourg, so she worked in French and everything. She was a tax consultant. Have I got everything in there?
Yes.
Thank you.
No, that's fine, yes.
It's a lot, isn't it?
It's a lot.
She's kind of an overachiever, you know. You wouldn't, you could hardly like this woman. She's done so much.
I know, it's a cross I have to bear, but
And over here we have the wonderful Jane Hardy, the writer, the author, the podcaster. She interviewed Margaret Thatcher. She'd like to point out
Long time ago.
that she wasn't a huge fan, but that's okay. Yeah,
of the achievement, but not the politics, it has to be said.
She always likes to put that little caveat in there. But we'll talk about that later. And here I have Sara Edge, a solicitor from Larne. She owns her own business. In fact, I think you own two practices because one isn't enough.
No.
She's an expert on matrimonial law and family law. She also does a bit of criminal law, which I see you in the papers. That looks like interesting stuff. She's a vice chair of the White Ribbon NI. Now, that's a global movement to end male violence against women and girls. That's an awful lot as well. Have I left anything out?
No, I don't think so. I think that that's me, really.
So this week we have a lot of overachievers, and let's see what we're going to talk about. Okay, first up this week, we are talking about something that was brought to my attention by Joanna here, and it's the myth that if you're a working woman without kids, that somehow your time is less valuable than anyone else's. Now, this is quite useful because the panel's quite split. On this side, these ladies don't have children, and on this side, we do have children. So, Joanna, how did this topic come up?
So for the last couple of months, I've been writing a newsletter called Over 45 and Fabulous.
I get that into my inbox.
Fabulous. And it's all about, it's basically for women of a certain age who have spent decades focusing on work and other people and now want to focus on themselves, but they just feel too damn guilty about it. And as I was kind of researching this and coming up with it, it struck me that a lot is written about working mums. Yeah. But less is written about working women who don't have children. And instead, there's a lot of perceptions around it. So, for example, just to give you a very concrete example, I was talking through, what I was working on with a friend of mine, and she said to me, because I was saying, sometimes it's very difficult for women to be selfish. And she said, well, what do you mean difficult for you to be selfish? You're already the ultimate selfishness. You don't have children.
Oh. My God. Right, okay. And how did that make you feel?
Well, I tell you what I went to a place of resentment, really thoroughly pissed off and a wee bit sad of not being seen. And then, given the work that I do, I just kind of fell off that drama triangle and I thought, well, let them. Okay, let them. I'm not going to get tied up in this.
Yes.
But it struck me that, following that, having conversations with other friends in a similar situation, some of the comments that society seems to think they can say to women without kids, just...
Wow.
Yeah, surprised me.
So, gosh, that is... okay. Jane, do women without kids feel judged? Have you experienced this?
No, I was thinking about it, and I don't think I actually have experienced this. When I was a young journalist, the Thatcher years and following, a lot of my colleagues didn't actually have kids.
Yes.
They had kids quite a lot later. And I don't think there was that judgment necessarily. Also, it has to be said that women... And it is women, and this is the issue, isn't it, really, have other responsibilities. I became a carer for my late mother, and that went on for some years. And at that point, I had to give up my job in London, really partly to look after her. And I juggled smaller jobs, you
But
know.
you had to do that because you had no children.
I had to do that because I had no children. My sister, who had children, didn't do it. You're quite
we go,
right.
yeah.
So it fell to the sort of spinster aunt. If
Oh,
you
I
like.
hate that
I know,
word.
isn't that terrible? I know, I shouldn't have used it, really,
No,
should
it's
I?
awful.
It fell to me to take on that task. But I didn't feel that judgment, except ironically from my mother, who kept saying, when you're going to have children, you know. So there is that pressure.
There is still the stigma.
But I also have to say, and perhaps this is going to sound rather defensive, I have had children a lot in my life because my late big sister, and she was quite a bit older than me, she shared her 2 kids. And when she died, I inherited a couple of 20-somethings, and we now have 5 of the next generation of the family, and we're all quite close. So there is a kind of way in which I have ersatz children and grandchildren.
Yes, yeah.
But again, that sounds rather defensive, doesn't it? If I'm saying, no, even though I don't have children, I've had a lot to do with children, which I have.
Sarah, do workplaces still favour employees without kids?
No, absolutely not. And that's absolutely the opposite of what our workplace culture is all about. What we are about is if you're happy at work, you're more likely, if you spend so much of your time in work to begin with, you have to be happy. And if a child has a medical appointment or a dentist appointment or a parent-teacher interview, then I am completely flexible.
You allow them to go out?
Of course. And then I know that, they're going to be back to work. They're going to make up the time during their lunch. They take extra time if they want to out of their holidays, but it's a give and take situation. But we're that's not my ethos, and I think that's possibly something that's maybe quite unusual because of the stereotype that solicitors are, maybe kind of, work really
very formal
hard
and
to the
very
bone
formal.
and,
But I mean,
that.
you're a solicitor and you're a mum. Do you struggle?
I mean, I can't pretend that I don't struggle, but I don't think I struggle any more or less than anybody else who has children or who doesn't have children. But I actually had my eldest daughter when I was 19. So I was first year doing my undergraduate law degree, and I had just really left school at 18. So I was, it was a bit of a, kind of big scandal, I suppose, at the time, you could say.
I know it's hilarious now.
Isn't
We
it?
look back at scandal and now, like, who cares? You know what I mean? But of course, back
then, and I just left grammar school and going to do law, and then I was pregnant. But at the same time, I'm so grateful to have my best friends who maybe didn't have children at that time, because the way I see it is that I couldn't really have coped without them. They are, adopted aunts and uncles and gunkles, whatever you want to call them, and they are all. I couldn't really, if I needed one of my children picked up from tennis and I was working late, I'd have a wealth of people that I could send a message to say, please, could you help me out? Could you pick up one of the kids? And they would be more than happy to help. And it's not a case, I don't think, of anybody's time being more valuable. I think it's more an issue of priorities. And as you say, Jane, you have different priorities and different responsibilities, and that's the way it works. So everybody has something to do. I don't know anyone that I'm friends with that that sits around and has nothing to do.
I wish that was me.
I wish it was me, but it never will be.
Absolutely.
But maybe we should challenge this assumption that it's women who keep the show on the road. Unfortunately, I think it is women who keep the show on the road. Yes, but why should this be? You see, know. I think that men and women actually have more in common than distinguish us, than separate us, really. And we've just had International Women's Day. And I mean, International Men's Day, of course, is 365 days of the year. Let's be absolutely honest.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But I think that there are more things that distinguish people. For example, do you read books? Do you not read books? Do you like Netflix? Do you not? Do you obsess about immigration? Do you not? Those are the important differences. Maybe this is because I'm a sort of 80s gal, I think there should be an equality, but there isn't. And we're assuming that women pick up the slack.
Because
yes, we do.
Because they do.
Is this ever going to change? I ask myself.
Is it? Is it ever going to change, Joanna?
Well, I think it will take more than just a couple of blog posts or whatever else for it to change.
Yes.
I think if you back into the dawn of time, I mean, women have been doing the thing and whatever else. And I think even if you think about in the 70s, in the 60s or 70s, our mothers, if they were mothers, wouldn't necessarily be able to work.
Yes.
And all of that.
True.
This is only 5 minutes ago at the end of the day.
Yes.
So I mean, I think we've been brought up with that, and that kind of is instilled in everything from social media down through to school. I mean, I've had my niece who's 13 going on about 16 and a half say to me, well, you know, why don't you have kids, Auntie Jojo? And, you know,
What do you say?
Yes.
well, I mean, the
do you
classic,
say
well,
to
the
that?
classic question was, Auntie Jojo, are you going to turn into a mad cat woman?
Oh, you see, I don't like that. This is like spinster. This is like
Well, it is.
you're either a mother or you're a mad cat woman. Like,
Yes, there's nothing in between.
Yeah.
nothing between. Nothing in between.
I think
I
particularly...
don't have a cat, incidentally.
Yes.
I have
Yet.
two, and they're the
Two
love of my
dogs.
life.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a husband.
2 children and a husband.
Yeah, I mean, is there a difference between, do friendships change when one friend becomes a mum? Have you found that?
I think they evolve.
Right.
But I mean, I think the word change is quite heavy and, you know, a lot of weight to that. I think they evolve
yes.
because you've got different, you know, your different priorities and whatever else. And sometimes if you're the only one without children and you're out on a night out and your friends are of that age that the kids are small and whatever else and they're going, you know, they're all of those things.
Yeah.
If the conversation is constantly about children and what's going on, then it can,
boring.
feel a little bit.
Even we find that boring.
Yes, I
Yes,
know,
but I'm not sure I entirely agree. I've got a lovely friend who's just had a little boy who's now 1 3/4, and we met up recently, and I tend to buy him a present every time. Dylan, he's a great character and going to be. Okay, we talked about him, and we had to focus on him a little bit because he was running around in Botanic Gardens. But we talked about work, we talked about life, we talked about everything else.
Oh, no,
and our
absolutely.
friendship, I think,
Yeah.
is still on track, if you know what I mean.
Exactly. So when I say evolve, I'm not saying that we're no longer friends. I mean,
No,
I have read
no,
kind
of
of
course
articles
not.
about, oh, you know, all my friends, you know, dumped me when they had kids. No, I don't. I mean, I you know, I was still very strong friends with them. I
Yes.
was honorary aunt to
Yes.
half the kids in Luxembourg. And it, you know, you're there for them, and particularly, you know, some of my friends when they first had children, I was there to kind of pick up the slack and you know
Yes,
come round and
yes.
help out and all
Auntie
of that sort
Jojo.
of. Auntie Jojo, and I was very good at Auntie Jojo. And similarly, you know, when I went through the burnouts and when I was there thinking I need to take my courage in both hands and ring and ask for help, it was a friend of mine who had children and she dropped everything and she's like, come round, you know, her son was at the creche, you know, I went round there, we picked him up and then she came back to mine. So she wasn't going to dump me as a friend.
No.
So when I say
That's
evolve,
really nice. Yeah, that's really nice. Just evolve
it
rather than
just
change.
evolves.
Yes,
You know,
it
we're
does
also, I
evolve.
think, as we grow up
Yeah.
as well and we get older, our relationships evolve as well because
Yeah.
we're different. You know,
Sarah, bringing you were very young whenever you became a mum. Like,
Yes,
how did that
yeah.
hit you, or were you just so young you just kind of got on
No,
with it?
it did. It definitely did hit me. I went to University of Ulster in Magee, and it was a lovely. We were so lucky. We had a small class of about 31, I think it was, and after the first year, I stayed up at university in halls in the first year, and then when my daughter was born at the end of the summer, my tutors rang my mum's house phone back in those days,
Yes.
and you know, to check, you know, how's Sarah and the baby, and you know, please know that we're here and we're support. And
That's really
that-
nice.
Yeah,
That's
I was so lucky,
Brilliant.
and I will always tell everybody this about the University of Ulster and about Magee campus, because it was like a family. It was like a classroom. Still,
That's
it
so
wasn't
nice.
very very large, and
Yes.
there was a real personal touch there. And they offered me distance learning and to take a year out, but I had that, you know. I can see it now as a silly kind of what would you call it?
I'm not a quitter.
Yes, and instead of seeing
Determination.
it as support, I think at that time I saw it as, they would like, you know, everyone wants me to like just drop out.
Yeah.
But no, I went back. So I went back after 2 weeks, but then I was living back at home in Larne, and I suppose all my friends of that year had all gone off to
Yeah.
university and had flown the nest as such. So I was back at home with a baby. We weren't married at the time, and again, these best friends I talk about, I mean, they didn't have children at that time. They were at different universities, different career paths. And, you know, I would say that it solidified our friendships.
Yeah.
And you're totally right. I think life, as you get older and that life changes, things change, priorities
Yes.
change. And therefore, of course, you know, your friendships are going to change like that. You know, I love my friends with children, love my friends that don't have children. And again, I feel quite spoiled at the moment because, you know, 2 of my best friends don't have children yet. I think they would like to maybe have a family at some point. But the way I see it is, by that point, my children might well be well grown up, and
you'll
I'll
be
be
able-
able to
yeah,
give something
yes,
back, you know,
yes.
and you know, and be able to say,
That's
oh
nice.
yes, you know, that problem with feeding or that issue with you know, toileting or whatever it might
Yeah.
be. Oh yes, I can help with that. So
that's
I'm looking
brilliant.
forward to that
Yes.
part.
I
you
think
know.
that's such a positive message too, that you were a teenage mum.
Oh yeah.
I love that. I mean, I just
Teen
love
mum.
that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
look at you now, Sarah.
Local Women Magazine presents Local Women Podcast, the show for things that matter. Keeping an Eye on It podcast from Local Women Magazine is brought to you by Cathedral Eye Clinic, Northern Ireland's leading eye specialist.
Right, ladies, we're going to move on to a more serious topic, I guess. This is what I'm going to call the text me when you get home culture. And I'm wondering, will things ever change? Joanna, do you take precautions when you go out alone, like sharing locations, holding your keys between your fingers, you know, that kind of stuff?
Well, first of all, I love the assumption that I go out a lot at the age of 52.
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting question. I think today I'm maybe a bit more bullish about it because I
Yes.
think also, you know, at a certain age you become invisible. I mean, you know,
Yes.
but certainly when I was younger, definitely I would still, in terms of precautions, I always know where I'm going to park. I always park in a car park, not on the street, because it's going to be lit and it's going to be lit all the way. There's security cameras to go back to the car, so that's definitely a precaution. And I think also the in terms of if I'm out with a group, kind of making sure everyone gets home. I think that's still there. Yes, absolutely, yes.
Jean, do you think men really understand this? Do they understand what we kind of go through?
No, I don't think they do. And funnily enough, I don't run a car, so I'm dependent on taxis and so on. I go out quite a lot as a theatre reviewer of a night, come back late, and you scuttle into
Scuttle. That's a good word, isn't it?
slightly into your house, and you think, you know, is there somebody behind me? If there is somebody behind you and it's a man, I've occasionally noticed really nice men crossing the road very deliberately and leaving you your space, and I like that. But sometimes in the daytime there are incidents, even when one is an invisible middle-aged to late middle-aged woman. Up the road from us there's a guy who seems not to have much to do, and he will come out into the middle of the road in quite, it sounds odd to say this, but in quite a threatening manner. And if I'm going shopping and I know he's clocked me, and, you know, I'm thinking I will go to the other side of the road and make avoidant action. But why should I? Why should I have to? And then he will eventually realise he's on to nothing. I mean, I just was certain he was going to approach me the other day, and I didn't want to be approached, to be perfectly honest. No. And so I think there is this constant question mark. I remember once, years ago, when I was au pairing in Switzerland, and I was on a station late at night, which I shouldn't have been. I was about 17. And this man came up towards me, and I thought, this is curtains.
This is it.
I thought, this is it. In fact,
We've all thought
he was
that,
being,
haven't we?
yes, he was being threatening. And then he bypassed me, and he'd got his thrill maybe because I unquestionably looked very scared.
Yeah.
And there was nothing I could easily have done at that stage. It was pre-mobile phones. It was you know, all the security sort of kit that we have now, you know. So I think one should take precautions. It's difficult to know exactly what and how good.
It's nearly
and,
impossible to know. I mean,
it is.
What about the law, Sarah? I mean, you're a solicitor. Are the law and punishments for, you know, violence against women, is it strong enough?
Well, I do think that there's been remarkable change with the introduction of the domestic violence legislation that came out in 2022.
Yeah.
So I do believe that the bringing in of that legislation has acted as a deterrent. It's nearly like what we might call like an aggravator. So if a crime was motivated by hate because of race or sexual orientation or religion, now this is tagged on sometimes in prosecutions as an extra nearly bolt-on offence, if you would put it that way, in relation to that. So I do think that the change in the legislation has definitely helped to bolster the overarching change. But when you say about, you know, the precautions that you take, I mean, I have been trying to, I wouldn't call myself a runner, you know, I don't want to, you know, take that title, but I've been trying to run a little bit more. And I think on top of my, like I would do a weekly park run. So obviously there's loads of people, it's at 9:30 in the morning. But in terms of I know I need to do more than that. So if I would like to, you know, go out in the evenings myself, but I wouldn't wear, it's not that I can't, I wouldn't wear noise cancelling headphones at night because I would be kind of conscious of that. And I think I said to one of my friends about that recently, you know, I don't ever really wear noise cancelling headphones, and they said, why not? And I said, well, that's kind of why you don't have your wits about you as such.
Yes.
But then equally, I was speaking to, you know, a friend the other day who mentioned that he was taking his teenage son to the gym now that he was old enough, and the teenage son had mentioned, he questioned his dad and said, why are there so many girls in here on treadmills? They've been here the whole time we've been here for over an hour. And I just couldn't believe my friend instantly turned around and said to him, because girls are too scared to go out running on the paths and the streets. And I think I was so refreshed that he had said that to his son. But then equally, I suppose the kind of follow up from that will be, you know, what are we going to do to make a change then? How are we going to change that attitude? And
I remember, but years and years ago, there was a movement about reclaiming the night, reclaiming the streets. Yes.
What
And I think
that?
that's a good and positive thing, and perhaps we need to revive that. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, Joanna, this is one thing that always comes up. Should women be taught self-defence in schools? And before you even answer, I'm going to say no.
Well, it's interesting. I think there's a couple of aspects to this. There's the aspect of we need to educate our boys not to attack.
Rather than our girls to defend themselves.
Oh, well, wait a minute. I mean, I think that there's boys not to attack, also girls not to attack each other and everything else. I mean, let's not pretend that girls are, you know, pure as the driven snow, you know.
No.
And then I think there's the other aspect in terms of being able to defend yourself. And I think is it a question of just self-defense or not? Possibly. I think also there's an aspect of, and this is a big part of the work that I do, it's about standing in the power of who you are and being able to walk through life knowing that you're solid and you are already enough. And I think if girls learned that they were already enough and they weren't less than, then, you know, if some guy comes and either, you know, tries to attack them, but I think also even more importantly around this, it's like the coercive control. Yeah. I mean, when I think about some of my ex-boyfriends and what we would today call coercive control, and I might have been this kind of really strong, powerful woman speaking on stages all around the world, you know, having the job that I had, but behind closed doors, you know, when a boyfriend says to you, you look like crap, go and get changed. And I've been there thinking, I've just spent half, you know, I'm so exhausted. I've just tried to get myself looking half decent. And then he just looks at me as if I'm nothing. I took that because I didn't know that I could say no to that. I didn't know that I could stand in my power.
So
of
that's
who
about
I was.
educating you as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right,
I think, completely. I mean, I mean, a lot's been said around this, as you say, around let's educate the boys not to attack women, but I think it's also about the girls and women to stand in, you know,
to not accept this kind of behaviour and call it out as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, because any time these things come into the press, it's always like all these ex-girlfriends come forward and went, he did it to me. And listen, I know why they haven't come forward, because they're scared. But,
It's like I had a boyfriend who would lose his temper. And he would say, I'm not being cross with you. I would say, but I'm in the same space, and actually
as he punched
that
the wall.
anger, precisely, that anger is heading my way as well as towards whatever opponent you may think you have. So you have to defend yourself in a sense, and you have to be on the qui vive, I think, and notice it.
And I think what makes it exactly, and what makes us think that this is perfectly normal behaviour.
I mean,
that's the question.
Yeah. I would definitely say with my teenage daughter, you know, some of the things, you know, you hear the banter and the kind of what's going on with the kids. But, you know, I would say that some of the ways that she and her friends talk about boys and what they expect. I mean, I am taken aback thinking, you know, at 16, 17, I don't know if I would have had the same. You know, they're just very, you know, I think it is a generation of young people coming up that are, you know, they're very clear in their rights and how strong they are. But I think the coercive thing is very interesting because it can be perpetrated against a woman or a man. And that's where I, you know, obviously find the conflict, because I would sometimes be representing female victims of domestic violence and harm and children, and then I might also be representing and defending a perpetrator and an alleged perpetrator.
What's that like?
So I think that's the point. It's always a case by case basis, and I suppose I sound like a bit of a hippie when I just kind of say that, you know, it's, if everybody just treated everybody well, if we all just treated everyone with respect and kindness, then none of these issues would certainly start to reduce. But it's the same as if, you know, if there's a vulnerable male out on the street and then they're attacked by a gang of men, or you know, as you say, girls can be, you know, very vicious, and you know, they can also actually cause, you know, very life-changing injuries to each other that maybe men don't intend to or don't do with their behaviour. So I think it's all about perspective and about, as you say, Joanne, about keeping the individual empowered and, you know, with the right toolkit, that they are in fact the strong one, and, you know, that you aren't giving off that kind of, you know, vibe. You are strong. I don't think I'd be much use in terms of a self-defence class. I think I'd be too scared of breaking a nail. But, you know, at the same time, I do think that, the burden should definitely not be shifted onto girls.
So Sarah, you're actually working with an organisation now that helps stop violence against women and girls. Tell us about that.
Yes, so White Ribbon NI is a part of a movement to end violence against women and girls. And it was a charity that was set up by one of my school friends who, Tawny McCory.
Wow.
We were at school together, and she was trying to identify people that might be appropriate to sit on the board of trustees. So she approached me, knowing that time is usually against me, but asked me if I would be a part of it. And I suppose what made it different than any other charity was that it was about education, and it was about you know, changing the attitude and behaviours of young men and men in general. And it's not just about males, it's about females as well. It's not a perpetrator type program that we offer and deliver. We offer a listen, learn, lead program, which has been really, really popular throughout all of the local sports clubs. All of the Irish Premier League football clubs have signed the charter.
Brilliant.
And then the GAA clubs, and then more and more sports clubs have come on board. And not only that, but we've also gone in and done some work within the prison setting. So we've been in Hyde Bank, and we've been working with females and the youths in the detention centre. And in fact, Tony was invited last year down to the Cork prison to deliver the Listen, Learn, Lead program. So the whole point of that is that it empowers everyone, and gives them the skills and the education to employ a change and make a change. So to call out locker room chat and so-called banter that's, you know, misogynistic and quite derogatory and disrespectful about women, and, you know, a bystander type thing, that if you were in a nightclub and a boy was not pestering a girl, and it was quite clear that she wasn't interested, that the other boys around would say, you know, it's quite clear she's not interested, so, you know, back off. So, I mean, it's an amazing charity. I'm really proud to be part of it. I'm actually the vice chair of the charity.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I'm just so excited for what lies ahead.
Great.
We recently received some additional government funding, and we've been able to open up 4 further full-time posts, which was amazing, just because of the demand for the Listen, Learn, Lead program. So I am very passionate about it, and I think, again, it's about, you know, I can't choose who walks in my office door.
No.
I can't say whether or not I'm going to be able to defend somebody, or if they're going to ask me to take a non-molestation order for them. But what I can do is be part of the change.
Brilliant. That's fantastic.
Local Women Magazine presents Local Women Podcast, the show for things that matter. Keeping an Eye on It podcast from Local Women Magazine is brought to you by Cathedral Eye Clinic, Northern Ireland's leading eye specialist.
And finally, I love an and finally, girls. Right, we're going to talk about the most bizarre compliments we have ever received. I'm going first with this, okay? Right, somebody once came up to me and said, you know what, Kim, I really like you, no matter what people say about you. Okay, thanks. Somebody else once came up to me. Now, I'd posted a picture of myself in a bikini on social media. I would like to point out I don't do that anymore, but I was obviously having a moment, okay? And this lady said, me and my husband saw you in your bikini on Facebook, and I just turned to him and said, she's game.
Yikes.
So come on, what have people said to you?
I can't compete with the bikini story. I really can't. My glasses. If I had £1, as they say, for every time somebody's come up to me and said they like these newish glasses, I would be, I'd have a few ice creams, let's put it that way. Amazing. I don't know what it is, but all sorts of different people, different age groups. My yellow coat, I've had young women, actually, not men, say that's a really positive colour. We like that colour, that's nice. My dentist, now dentists are good for compliments. My new dentist said, I really like your accent. That was before he put me under, so maybe it was to put me at my ease. And then I had a rather charming incident recently. I was interviewing a woman from the BBC, and so we went opposite to the Clayton, and we were having coffees, and I went and ordered some coffees, and he said, I'm not going to charge you because you're so nice.
Oh.
Nice, very
I
nice.
it.
That's
Yeah.
nicer than my bikini. And so, what about you, Joanna?
Well, I have had, a few times in my previous incarnation, people say to me, you know what, Jo, for a tax consultant, you're actually quite interesting.
I
love that.
Quite
I
interesting.
love that. I love
Quite,
that.
I mean, not very
Yes.
interesting.
Just
Quite
Just
interesting.
quite interesting, because
Quite
you wouldn't want to
yes.
inflate my ego. Or
No,
anything like that.
quite
I'm
plenty.
very
Quite
thought.
plenty. Yeah.
I'm just trying to think, because what I have noticed is I've got better at accepting compliments.
Yes. We all need to be a little bit better.
Yes.
I've started saying thank you, but I think one of the other weird ones, talking about my dentist, I remember at one point a dentist saying to me that I had really nice brown eyes, just like a cow.
Lovely. Yes, that's
Yes.
very, very nice. I like that. I like that.
Yes.
I can't wait to hear what people have said to you, Sarah, because
Oh,
I know
dear.
it's going to be outrageous.
Well, when people get my name wrong, which is quite common, I just say I've been called worse. But apart from that, I usually get, when people maybe have spoken to me on the phone but they haven't met me yet, or during COVID we had to do obviously a lot of video calls, and then they meet me in person, and I think they always say, I didn't think you were a solicitor, or you don't look like a typical solicitor to me. And I suppose that, was kind of drummed into me, I suppose, from an earlier age, but not in such a good way, that when we practice mock interviews for your chosen career at Big School, I had been interviewed by someone and got the feedback at the end of it, and the feedback was, you don't look conservative enough to be a solicitor. I had the curly hair with the mousse in it, and I had, a little pink butterfly brooch and a pink pinstripe jacket instead of a white. And I wasn't a top grade A student by any means, but I certainly had the drive and the determination and the work experience, no doubt. So now I suppose the way I kind of like twist that on its head is that I'm now part of the mock interview panel for students who wish to study law. I'm speaking at the University of Ulster careers event tomorrow in Belfast, so that'll be amazing. I'm looking forward to that. And just to get back to the university, and I am, just, as you say, I suppose it's just, putting it back on the person who said it. So if it is a compliment,
It's like, what a
accept it and
strange
say
thing to
thank you
say.
very
Yes, thank
much,
you.
and don't run yourself down. But then if it is something a bit pointed and a bit unusual, just, kind of stop a minute, and then maybe let there be a moment or two
Yes.
for them to take it back and go,
Or you could maybe just own it. From now on, you can say,
Yeah, just
I
own
am
it.
Sarah Edge and I'm a solicitor, only better looking. Right, and that's it, girls, or ladies, should I say? You're not really meant to say girls anymore, but we're all girls here, aren't we? Thank you so much for coming on my panel, Jane, Joanna, and Sarah, three absolutely fabulous women. And thank you for listening to the Keeping an Eye on It podcast from Local Woman, sponsored by Cathedral Eye Clinic. See you next week.
Local Women Magazine presents Local Women Podcast, the show for things that matter. Keeping an Eye on It podcast from Local Women Magazine is brought to you by Cathedral Eye Clinic, Northern Ireland's leading eye specialist.